Hi there, I'm James. Now, I wonder what you make of this passage. It says this, it's in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 to 20. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honour God with your bodies. So according to this passage, I'm a temple and you're a temple. And that's if we trust in Jesus. What is the temple and what's in the temple? Well, a temple, thankfully, doesn't have to be a building, so you don't have to start wallpapering your forehead. The very first temple in the Bible was the world. When God made the earth, he was with Adam and Eve, and the whole earth was his kingdom. And so since the temple is where God's presence is, where his holy presence is, that means that the first temple that we hear in the Bible was the earth. But there was a problem, and that was that Adam and Eve, as you know, probably know the story, they ate the apple, and since then every human being except Jesus has rejected God in their life and chosen to live their own way instead. And so in that way they were kicked out of that temple, they were kicked out of Eden, and we have been separated from God, or we had been, as you'll see, separated from God ever since that time. So that was the first temple. But then later on in the Old Testament, God called a people to himself, and that's the Israelites, and he ruled them through Moses from the tabernacle. And the tabernacle was like a kind of a tent, but it was a tent that acted as a temple, and it represented God's presence with his people. And in the tabernacle, animals were regularly being sacrificed to show that it was kind of like to show a temporary payment of the sin and covering the debt of sin that we had. So every time they sacrificed an animal, it was to show how terrible sin was, and it was a way of saying we recognise how bad that sin is, and we're paying for it with this animal. But it was only a symbol; it couldn't actually do that. So after that time, by the time Paul wrote 1 Corinthians, which we just read up at the top part of, the temple that they would have seen was one that was rebuilt. That'd be rebuilt in Solomon's time as a physical temple, and then again in Nehemiah's time, which is after the Israelites went into exile, they came back, they built another temple, and then it was renovated again by the Roman ruler King Herod, who you might have heard of. But no matter how much the temple was renovated and rebuilt and extended, the fact still remained that it didn't solve the problem. Sin and rebellion still cut humanity off from God, and no amount of goats or sheep was going to bridge that gap. So there remained a temple, and in the centre of that temple there was a curtain, and that curtain was there to loudly basically say we're cut off from God. That curtain stayed there until finally Jesus came and he died on the cross. And on the day that Jesus died on the cross, it says that the curtain of the temple was split in two from top to bottom, and there was now free access to God through his son Jesus. So Jesus died as the true, final and complete sacrifice of God to clear that debt of wrong that we owed to God. And this was God stepping in to cover the cost himself. After 3 days, the price of every evil under the sun was fully paid, and Jesus rose from the dead to take the throne in heaven. That's the real temple in heaven. And now our sin is taken care of, so now that's happened. God has built us into a new temple. We are a place where God's presence is. Just like heaven, we have Jesus in us, God in us. So we ourselves have become that most holy place where God lives. Jesus' sacrifice has given us free access to God. And that means he's made us holy and that he lives in us. Now that we know who's living inside of us, how can we live in a way that's hospitable to him?